region and the challenges for the UK media in covering what's happening. In a moment, we're going to speak to Shana Oppenheimer from BBC Monitoring, who's with us from Tel Aviv. But let's begin with Shoshank Joshi, defence editor at The Economist. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the media show. I wonder, as you've both contributed to the media coverage and consumed the media coverage more broadly, how you have observed the British media responding to this story and framing how to tell this story.
Well, the first and most obvious thing is where the story is being told from. That includes my own outlet, The Economist, as well as many other UK-based publications. There are very, very few, if any, publications that have permanent staff based in Iran. And that's partly a function of the way the Iranian regime has conducted itself. It has arrested many, many dual nationals over the years, accusing them of espionage, and it has not been a hospitable place to do journalism. And therefore the result is that most organizations covering this story are based either in Israel or in other parts of the Middle East, but not in Iran. And that creates a certain, I think, detachment from what's happening. But the other thing that strikes me that's very interesting is we're dealing with a sort of simultaneous transparency and opacity. And the transparency is the fact that I am able to acquire satellite photographs of nuclear sites in Iran of a sort that would have blown the socks off a CIA chief in the 1950s within hours. But actually, at the same time, I am grappling with very, very sensitive claims about intelligence that are much more challenging to vet, scrutinize, probe, and I think that this is a problem we are finding in many conflicts around the world.
And how do you go about that challenge that you described in the last part of your answer, that you're getting information about what's happening in Iran often from your sources, but then the work of standing that information up is particularly difficult?
Well, I think part of the answer is using social media and other channels to try to get first-hand accounts of what's happening on the ground. And that can serve us very well in some circumstances. In cities where there are lots of people with mobile phones capturing footage, obviously it does not serve us very well when it comes to the question of whether a particular building struck in Tehran was a centrifuge production facility for uranium. We can't answer that just by studying the wreckage from the outside. And so the answer, as always with good journalism, as you both know very well, is triangulation. You talk to as many people as you can from a range of different backgrounds and nationalities, and you try to piece together different parts of the puzzle, always accepting that you don't know everything, and I think conveying some of those caveats to your readers or your viewers or listeners.
Would you also try and develop sources within Iran, or would doing that put them at risk to a degree that you wouldn't be comfortable with?
No, we'd absolutely develop sources within Iran. Some of my colleagues have excellent sources within Iran. And Iran is, it is a repressive state. But that doesn't mean people can't talk to you using encrypted apps, using means of safe and secure communications that would not have been available to people 15 or 20 years ago in the same way. And that allows us to get those direct views of people. I think having said that, though, we are aware that when you talk to some people in Iran, they will be operating under conditions of surveillance, of self-censorship, and also they may have to tailor what they say and what they tell you for fear of repercussions, and you have to factor that in. I will say here, of course, on the Israeli side, Israel has wartime censorship, and it has a military censor that operates even in peacetime. So, for instance, Israel has asked people not to report on where missiles have struck buildings in case that it helps Iranian targeting, and there are certain subjects that Israeli journalists cannot report on unless they attribute it to the foreign press. So that sense of wartime restraint is absolutely operative in Israel to some degree as well.
Shosha, one aspect of this story which you will be able to cover is the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's direct communication with Iranians, often happening via media outlets, where he is saying this is an opportunity for you to change who controls and runs your country. What's your observation of how he's used the media to deliver that message?
Well, this is interesting because the Israel Defense Forces have a just as they have an Arabic language spokesman, they have a Persian language spokesman who delivers messages in Farsi, and some of those are operational messages, like the one we saw recently to clear large areas of Tehran, but some of those are very political messages. And similarly, from the Prime Minister, he has used often television channels that are popular in the Iranian diaspora, like Iran International, as he did the other day, to deliver a message effectively of his ambition of regime change in Iran. I think this is particularly effective when you have a very connected population, but Iran, of course, is also trying to disrupt and limit the internet domestically, because it is aware that that also is a way of keeping itself safe sometimes.
Very useful. Shashank, thank you very much for joining us on the Media Show. That's Shashank Joshi, who's the defence editor of The Economist.
And now we're also joined by Shana Oppenheimer from BBC Monitoring, who is in Tel Aviv. Welcome, Shana.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Just tell me first, how did you and other outlets in the region hear about this operation first? And also, where you are in Tel Aviv, how has the domestic media been covering the story, the impact of the strikes in Israel?
I'll start personally. I was sleeping on last Thursday night. I was awoken around 3 in the morning by missile sirens. At this point in the war, you kind of assume they're all being launched from Yemen, so there's a tendency not to take them too seriously. I personally didn't bother to make it to a bomb shelter. I just kind of stood in my hallway. And as the siren ended, it was a bit shorter than usual. I got an alert to my phone, which I had never gotten before, kind of this warning sound saying to be near a protected area. It was quite confusing. And then very quickly through local media and kind of my own journalist channels, we understood that the Israeli military had struck sites in Iran, and this is kind of when all of it started. There was a bit of shock and surprise, even though there was a lot of reporting leading up to this that indicated this could happen.
And how quickly did you start reporting it, and you and others? And of course, I'm very interested in how the domestic media is covering it.
Pretty soon I kind of turned on the channel, started looking at things, writing my colleagues about it, and kind of I cover mostly Israeli media and how it's kind of messaging and portraying events to the public, and very, very quickly you see this kind of wartime mode kick into gear with the Israeli media putting up slogans of "Together we will win," Israel attacking Iran, and very much cheerleading what they see as significant military achievements in Iran, while not mentioning whatsoever the civilian impact of those strikes.
And do you see different media coverage across, depending on the political spectrum, or is it all very one note?
I would say what's quite striking about this, though, is a general trend in the Israeli media and the public is on the eve of this attack. There was a lot of criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the way he was handling the war in Gaza, and the view that it's dragging on kind of for his own political survival. And you see that criticism really heavily in the mainstream media, the left-wing media, not so much the right-wing media. The second Israel kind of goes and decides to launch an attack on Iran, and Netanyahu, I will say, has a tendency to pursue kind of favorable public policy. You see kind of across the board this kind of excitement and cheerleading and kind of view that this was a good thing. And for Netanyahu, we can talk a lot about his calculations, but this was a fantastic distraction from all of the criticism that he has kind of been receiving since October 7th, before October 7th. Just on the eve of this, he himself kind of being able to escape a pretty significant threat to his own ruling coalition.
And there was even a presenter, wasn't there, comparing him to Churchill and other big figures?
Yeah, we've seen that a lot in right-wing media. One broadcaster said that by striking Iran, Netanyahu kind of proved himself to do much more for the world than Winston Churchill or MLK ever did, though that kind of sentiment is not necessarily shocking from something like Channel 14, which is kind of likened to the Israeli Fox News. I think what's more striking is when you see it in mainstream media, when the day before there was so much criticism of the way he handles his kind of military policy.
Shana Oppenheimer, thank you very much for coming on the programme, and thanks too to Shashank Joshi, who was speaking to Roz earlier.
Well, this week it is 8 years since the fire at Grenfell Tower, which killed 72 people, including 18 children. The subsequent Grenfell inquiry found all of their deaths were avoidable. And on Friday, Netflix is releasing a new documentary called Grenfell Uncovered. It's made by Rogan Productions, and one of the key focuses of the documentary is who knew what and when about the cladding.
This is described as sticking a petrol tanker to the outside of a building. This was this huge corporate scandal. There's internal emails that say, oops, we are not clean.
Sadly, companies were able to find a way around the regulations.
Any minister who wants to introduce a regulation has to scrap one.
We raised concerns with the council. We were labelled scroungers. We didn't deserve anything, so just shut up.
There are thousands of buildings that still have the combustible cladding.
Feel free to ask me as many questions as you like, but use your time wisely. Right.
That final person speaking was Eric Pickles, who was Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government at the time of the fire.
Well, the director of this new documentary is Alaide Sadiq, and she joins us now. Welcome, Alaide.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're really welcome. It's great that you're here. It's obviously not the first documentary that's been made about the Grenfell Tower fire. That's not surprising. It's 8 long years, and it's important to keep this in the public eye, and I was involved from the very beginning. But what were you setting out to achieve? What was your intention to make this different and move this forward if you can?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for asking me. It was to, I guess you can say, not to make what some would say another sad documentary. A lot of the bereavement survivors and people in the community felt like that had been done. They felt like people know they went through this horrible ordeal, are still going through this horrible ordeal. So what we wanted to do was, having the freedom of the inquiry coming to a close, be able to bring together a lot of the revelations, a lot of the facts that maybe people don't know about, and balance out this sort of systemic failings and create a kind of bold forensic examination of what happened and how it happened, whilst balancing the very real trauma that the bereavement survivors and the wider community had gone through.
And I do definitely want to talk to you in a second about what you found, because it is very interesting. But just that conflict that you must face as a filmmaker, where you know that you do need to ask people, or you feel you need to ask people to retell the story that they first told all those years ago on the news and have been telling again and again since, and it's very traumatizing for them to do so. I wonder how you worked out how to do that and how the survivors reacted to having to retell their stories.
Do you know what? Obviously, it took some time, and I think it was like making it a safe space for people to want to tell us their story. There are some people who have spoken in this documentary at length, probably for the first time, to this degree. Obviously, they've done maybe small news pieces and stuff like that, and there are people who are taking part, not necessarily being survivors, but are taking part for the first time in a Grenfell documentary. So it was about buying into what we were saying we wanted to do and believing us. So it was about building trust and saying that we want to make this different, we want to make this purposeful, we want to make this bold, and we want people to understand what happened and how it happened. And I think, you know, the trust was there, the trust was built, and it allowed people to come to us and tell their stories. And actually, I think they welcomed the opportunity to do so, because a lot of people want to keep speaking, but they haven't had resolve, they haven't had a conclusion. So whilst they haven't had that, the Grenfell story is still very real for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the Grenfell report, the inquiry report, identified a series of failures by both government and the private sector, rendering the tower a death trap, and the cladding was pinpointed as the principal factor for the rapid spread of the fire. And drilling down into who knew what about the cladding and when is, as we were saying, a key aspect of your documentary. What new evidence did you uncover, and how did you get it?
So we obviously combed through the inquiry in fine detail, so there are a lot of things from the inquiry that people may not have seen before that we've brought to light, and we also went through our own endeavours to look into paperwork and different actions that took place in America to understand that one of the companies involved who made the cladding may have known about the dangers of the product, years before the fire, and that's what we wanted to find out, and I think that's what we did find out, and that's what we brought to the surface in a way that we feel is new and hasn't been done before.
And you took legal action, I think, in order to get some internal emails released between staff at this company, the cladding manufacturer in the US, Arconic. What did they reveal? Yeah. How did you do that, and what did they reveal?
I mean, the process was about submitting a case to do it, and that had to go through its own process. And that took some time. So that was the how. It wasn't. We didn't kind of go through all of them, but we put our case and we had to wait for an answer. And what it revealed was that senior executives at Arconic were aware of the dangers of that particular product before and during the sale of Grenfell, and even just after the sale. And at one point did they, step in and maybe pull it from the sale or advise that it wasn't suitable, even though there was documents to show that the PE version of that product wasn't suitable for high-rise buildings, and that is the product that ended up on the Grenfell Tower, unfortunately.
So yes, these were the cassette-shaped cladding elements that were on that fire, that went up so quickly up the side of that building once the fire started. Is what you found significantly different to the criticism of Arconic by the inquiry chairman, Sir Martin Moore? And because he said the company had deliberately and dishonestly concealed test data going back to 2005 that showed its cladding burnt in an extremely dangerous way and misled the market with safety statements it knew to be false, he said.
Yeah, I'd say we were aligned with what he says, and I think we've tried to go further in trying to highlight that, because not everyone probably would have listened to Sir Martin Moore's delivery or read the inquiry, followed the inquiry, wanted to make, not just about Arconic, but everyone involved in the Grenfell story wanted to make that information digestible to a lot of audiences who may not know about Grenfell at all or know who's involved. And
what response have you had from Arconic?
Their response is in the film, and their response is brief, and their response was that they didn't mislead, and they stand by their product being safe to use in building construction.
And we did, of course, ask for a statement from the company. We didn't get a response, but at the Grenfell Inquiry final report last year, they said that their subsidiary, Arconic Architectural Products, SAS, supplied sheets of aluminium composite material that were used to manufacture the rain screen for the Grenfell Tower refurbishment. They add this product was safe to use as a building material and legal to sell in the UK, as well as the more than 30 other countries in which AAP customers purchased the product. We reject any claim that AAP sold an unsafe product.
Hello, Elodie. It's Roz here, listening to you talking with Katie. As I'm listening to you, I'm wondering what kind of response you've had from the community around Grenfell Tower, and whether you were nervous about showing the community the film.
I wouldn't say I was nervous. The response actually has been predominantly positive. I think obviously there's so much to the Grenfell story, and there's only so much you can include, and we can't tell every story, and we know we're not the first documentary, and we're probably unlikely to be the last. But I would say the response has been really positive. It's been very emotional. It's a very, very emotional space, given that it's 8 years on, very recently. The silent walk I was out on Saturday was very sombre. I think with the announcement of the tower coming down, there's a very different feel in the community. So I think people welcomed seeing it, and I think they appreciated the opportunity to see it before it was launched on the platform. And that feedback was very raw, very emotional, but it was very emotionally charged as well. And I think it galvanised a lot of people who feel like this could help push the dial somewhat in their push for change and justice.
And you used the word galvanise. Is it your hope that more broadly the many people who watch this documentary on Netflix will be galvanised? Are you hoping for an impact such as, in a very different way, we saw from programmes like Adolescence or Mr. Bates versus the Post Office?
I mean, I think if it had a sliver of the same, that would be amazing. Both those programmes did such an amazing job of igniting conversations and getting people talking and pushing for change, and I think that's what the Grenfell community and the bereaved and survivors want. They want change, they want accountability, they want justice, and I think the way we've packaged this film, I hope that would be something that can kickstart those conversations. I think if it's having real conversations with decision makers in this country, I think that would be massive for us and massive for all those directly affected by the fire, because it is a story that doesn't just concern the victims and the bereaved. I think it concerns all of us. We all live in this country, and it happened in this country, and it very well could happen again if change isn't made. So I think it would be amazing if the documentary does have a wider impact on the cladding still on buildings, on the way we govern this country, the way people in social housing are treated. There's a number of things that we cover that we'd like to conversations to be started from, for sure.
So you're looking to start conversations to have impact with the work that you've done. I'm sure you're aware that some of the survivors who are featured in your documentary have taken matters into their own hands, and they've gone to Pittsburgh, the headquarters of Arconic, and they've been giving out leaflets and talking to people in Pittsburgh about what happened with the fire at Grenfell,
yes,
and then they've been posting some of these exchanges on social media. I wonder what you make of that as a way of pushing the agenda, of creating content that might provoke conversations or actions.
I think the survivors and the bereaved of Grenfell haven't had justice, so they're going to do whatever they feel they need to do to keep that conversation alive and take information to those who they think might not know. Obviously, a lot of people in Pittsburgh and in America might not even know Grenfell happened. So I think them go travelling all the way there to spread the word and bring awareness to their story is a very powerful thing to do. And I commend them for doing that, and they're in their rights to do that.
Well, thank you very much for making time for us on the media show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Lovely to you guys.
That's Ulaide Sadiq, director of this new documentary called Grenfell Uncovered. It's released on Netflix on Friday. And Katie, I wanted to ask Ulaide about these clips that are being posted on YouTube, but I wanted to ask you about it too, because it's quite an unusual form of media content to come out of people who are also involved in a more traditional, shall we say, documentary.
Yeah, I think it's probably becoming more common. I first heard about this. It's a film that they've made, and it was sent to me by a survivor, one of the people involved in it, and it hasn't been watched by that many people yet, but we will see it. As you said, it's a group of Grenfell Tower survivors and residents. They go to Pittsburgh to try to talk to people there about what happened, because that is where the parent company of the cladding manufacturer is located. And I just find it very interesting, having followed this story and been involved with survivors and the residents more widely for 8 years now. It's really interesting to observe the different ways that they try to keep Grenfell Tower in the public consciousness. While we were talking to Ulaide about the fact that it's painful for them personally to do so, but they really want and need to do it. And the filmmaker was someone they knew. They see him as an advocate for Grenfell, and for them this is a much more direct way of taking control, as Ulaide was alluding to, taking control of the narrative. And this platform offers that, and they were talking to me about it. They said they seized it with both hands when they had the idea. This was what they wanted to do.
Well, that programme can be found on YouTube, and as we were saying, the documentary Grenfell Uncovered is on Netflix from Friday.
Now, I wonder how many of you use the social media platform Reddit. The answer might well be higher than it was last year, because as Reddit becomes 20 years old, it is growing in the UK.
Now, I should say, if you haven't used Reddit, let me quickly explain. It features more than 100,000 interest-based communities, and these communities are on everything from politics to cute animals and lots of other things besides. Reddit has over 100 million daily active users globally, and according to the media regulator Ofcom, last year Reddit was the 5th most popular social media platform in the UK.
Well, in case you're wondering, that list in full is YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit and X. Well, only one of them is with us today, but we're excited that she is. It's Reddit's Global Head of Community, Laura Nessler. Welcome to the Media Show, Laura.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. For those who don't know about it, and there must be some, although I hate to say it, how would you describe Reddit? How it works. Just describe it to somebody who doesn't know.
Sure. I think you did a wonderful job. The way I would describe Reddit is a community of communities. It's a place where people, anyone, you can come together around the things that you care about the most. So you can go and learn about something, but also you can go in and get really deep on a niche particular interest and find people there that are just as passionate about those things as you are. So for
how
example,
do you get into it? I mean, just describe for people, what do you actually do? What is this, when you go on a subreddit or a thread, what is it?
Sure. So a subreddit is just a community. Like you mentioned, there's over 100,000. They're all created and run by community members themselves. So you could search for a new skincare regime or how to rebuild an engine, and you'll find a community for that on Reddit. You can immediately join the conversation by posting or commenting or voting and just getting involved.
And what are the most popular ones in the UK then, if you drilled into the data?
The UK users are incredibly engaged. I, of course, have to mention Premier League, right, for the football fans. Each individual side has their own community as well. Casual UK is a large community for dry humor and discussions, but warning, no politics are allowed there. So specific communities have specific rules. One of my personal favorites is Gardening UK. It's a niche community that spun off from the US or global gardening community because British users wanted UK climate-specific gardening advice.
Yes, I have to say, I was thinking about this the other day, thinking I need to go on Reddit and find out about the slugs in my dahlias because nobody else is helping me, and I suddenly realised there's going to be a subreddit for that and I need to get involved.
I can appreciate it.
I'm sure there is, right?
I mean, danger of veering off into another radio forecast.
Yeah, we are, it's true. My name's not Bunny. Roz and I are news people, first and foremost, I suppose. And there's a new report by the Reuters Institute released yesterday which suggests that social media is now the main source of news in the US. Do users go to Reddit for news, I wonder?
Well, certainly what's happening in the news is happening on Reddit. It really is a reflection of whatever's happening in the world. But the nuance here is that people go to Reddit for discussion about the news. So you'll see a breaking headline posted, and then hundreds of people on Reddit unpacking it in the comments. They want to recount the play-by-play. They want to assess the impact of whatever event just broke. So it's not just about what happened. It's really about the conversation.
And you've mentioned several times the moderators and the community are at the heart of this, and that each different section may have different rules. So help us understand how the moderation works. How do the rules get enforced?
Sure. Yeah. Our unique moderation model is really what keeps Reddit real. It's what creates spaces for people to feel vulnerable and be authentic. There are 3 layers of moderation. First, Reddit, the platform, governs the infrastructure. So things like policies, safety standards, we enforce a set of rules that applies to everybody. But moderators are the second layer. Every community has at least one moderator, and these are community members, not Reddit employees. And what they do is they create an additional set of rules that sit on top of our platform policies that are tailored to the community's unique needs and goals. So for example, UK personal finance, they have an additional set of rules that includes no specific investment recommendation. My favorite example is a community called Cats Standing Up.
Right.
You may be surprised to find out that Reddit...
Niche.
Yeah, Reddit Corporate, we do not have any site-wide rules dictating whether cats can be sitting or standing. That may be a surprise, but you better believe that in that community, your post will be removed by the moderators if it's not a cat, and that cat is not standing up.
Well, I guess
we also have a third layer of moderation, which is our users. So this is really important because users' participation is what makes Reddit really authentic. It's how content is displayed within the communities. And what it does is it builds the community's culture because it creates a single shared view of all of the content with the community posts. But I think what's important to remember is that the power on Reddit is distributed by design, right? It is this tension and checks and balances with communities at the center of gravity that all exist to make sure the communities thrive.
But if the communities are the center of gravity and you have this model which really can only thrive with those communities being very active, I'm listening thinking, well, I can understand why people might want to join these communities, but I'm also thinking this sounds like a lot of work for someone to maintain these communities. Does Reddit pay any of them?
We do not pay our moderators. No, moderators, I think what's important to remember is that moderators are here for their communities, right? Not for Reddit. They don't have a specific set of tasks that Reddit is giving them. So our role at Reddit is really to empower our moderators, ensure that they have the tools and the programs to be successful at whatever the goal is for their individual community. Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been investing in on Reddit side.
And I must ask you about AI. Of course, any conversation around any tech product has to has to feature that. You place a huge emphasis as a company, and you've also done this during the interview on the importance of community and of the individual moderators who make Reddit so special. But surely there is a risk here that as Reddit embraces AI in a range of ways, you won't be such a human company, that actually the technology will become more dominant in shaping the experience.
If left unchecked, yes. But I believe that it's as much of a challenge as it is an opportunity. So looking ahead, of course, we're really focused on preserving the humanness of Reddit and the internet in general. People are exhausted by inauthentic information online. Everything is polished, everything is sponsored, everything is AI generated, and that's just not Reddit, right? Reddit is real. So what we're doing to make sure that Reddit stays human is exploring ways to confirm that users are real people without needing their personal information. So we need to know you're a human, but we don't need to know your name.
So that helps in terms of the users, but in terms of how the moderation and the site works, if you are, for example, and I think this is correct, Reddit is allowing AI models to train on Reddit content. Once the AI has learned how the Reddit content works, surely it will be in a position to moderate, to shape the content that is posted or not posted on Reddit, and thus it will do quite a few people who love the platform out of a role.
Well, I would disagree. I think when used well, it can really help moderators flag things like rule-breaking content. Imagine if you have a niche community and you have a set of rules. That AI could understand those rules. And when people come into your community, maybe that AI, when you are posting something that's against the rule, for example, a dog in the cat standing up community, AI could help solve that for a mod before they have to see it. So really, I think that it's important that human verification is top priority, right? Reddit's going to thrive because it's real, it's people helping other people, and AI needs to support the moderators. There's never a world where AI should replace the moderators, because at that point, Reddit loses everything that makes it special.
And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. That's Laura Nessler, Global Head of Community from Reddit. And Katie, we've talked about AI a lot on the media show and its many different roles. I'm not sure we've talked about it identifying whether a cat is standing up or not, but there we go.
We haven't, but I am going to go and have a look at that and just see what's going on.
Check if it actually exists. I'm not doubting Laura's word for a moment.
You're BBC verified, but I'm going to go and verify it for you. Okay, I'll do that one for you for free. Now, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of attention on some of Radio 1's latest presenter decisions. To some degree, there always are. People care a great deal about presenter lineups on the biggest networks, but we wanted to talk about this, as it wasn't so much the presenters in question that caused the debate, it was their professional backgrounds.
For example, Made in Chelsea star Sophie Habib joined her husband, Radio 1 presenter Jamie Lang, who also was someone who, to some degree, made his name on Made in Chelsea. They're going to be doing a 3-week stint on the station's afternoon show. That's ending today. And also, social media star and podcaster GK Barry is taking over the weekend afternoon show throughout July.
Well, there's been a bit of consternation on social media. I'll give you a bit of a flavour from Instagram. Someone said it doesn't sit right with me when there's people trying so hard to get a break. And then someone else said there are so many hard-working and capable presenters covering gigs at Radio 1 at the moment. How undermining. They weren't given the chance to show the listeners what they're capable of.
And just this from Patricia Nichol at The Times, who says, it sparks questions about the reach of influencer culture and the point of this glossy, already privileged pair presenting a peak-hour show on public service radio while scores of bedroom DJs graft away. I should say that at the time when this was reported by the BBC, BBC News Online noted some criticism of the decision has been expressed, but there was similar criticism when Jamie took over from Jordan North in 2024, but Radio 1 says he's become a firm favourite with the listeners.
Well, what does all this say about the changing role of music radio and the talent pipeline into audio broadcasting? We're joined by Caroline Frost, who's a journalist and columnist for the Radio Times, and also Sarah Carson, Chief Culture Writer for The Eye. And Caroline, welcome. If we start with you, what do you make of this move to presenters who got their first start in reality TV or social media?
Well, you can see why the BBC would want to do it. It's the same reason that they recruit these social influencers for shows like Strictly Come Dancing, because it reaches a young audience very quickly. I mean, Jamie Lang has 1.6 million followers on Instagram. His wife Sophie has a mere 966,000 followers. So immediately, all they have to do is to write about something coming up on their show, and that is a very cheap, big billboard advertisement without having to pay for it. But I do think it's a shame. I mean, I am old school. I grew up on Radio 1, and as well as the inevitable smashy and nicey contingent that we all grew up with and enjoyed, there were people who genuinely cared not just about radio, but also about music. And the great pioneers of the past in that slot include Tony Blackburn, Noel Edmonds, Mike Reid and Gary Davies, who people may laugh at their style these days. They're certainly of their era, but nobody can doubt how passionate they were about their craft. And I don't think that they were just doing something to sneak it in between reality TV dining shows and trips to Dubai to advertise their wares, which is what influencers have to do. That is their job. But it does mean that we're getting them sort of in passing. And of course it means that the pipeline is being squashed as well. We don't have the local radio, we don't have the community radio, we don't have the hospital radio people coming up, doing the hard yards, doing the night shifts, proving their wares. I'm not going to be a cliche and mention John Peel, but let's talk Annie Nightingale, let's talk Joe Wiley, people who we know live and breathe music and bring the best, sometimes the worst to us, but really know their craft. These people are shiny, young, fresh, happily married buttons. I wish them all the best, but I don't think that they bring me or anybody younger than me anything that is new or diverting.
So you're not entirely convinced by the sounds of it. Sarah Carson from The Eye, what about you?
In a nutshell.
I mean, I'm a big lover of radio. I've listened to the radio I probably first started listening to Radio 1 about 20 years ago when it was Wake Up with Moyles, Get Home with Mills, and that Get Home with Mills would be the slot that, the going home slot that Sophie and Jamie are now in. So my kind of first instinct is always to say, no, I hate this invasion of every kind of corner of culture by influencers, but I really feel that if we dismiss reality TV as a talent pipeline, we cut off quite a lot of really great personalities, big charismatic people who then go on to be good presenters across elsewhere in the media. And I'm not going to argue that Sophie Habir and Jamie Land wouldn't have found that elsewhere. They are incredibly privileged, both of them. So, but it is an opportunity for other people to get a start into the radio. This isn't a start for them, though. They have successful podcasts. They've proven they can build up a relationship with the listener.
And Caroline, on that point, does it matter if every single radio presenter on a music station isn't an expert in music? They can bring a range of other things to the listeners, and other programs can have specialist DJs who are particularly knowledgeable of one type of music or another.
Sure, and especially in this day and age when people go to Spotify and to other platforms for those niche tastes and pastimes. However, I did enjoy Sarah's piece in The Eye defending Sophie this week, and she makes a great point about their likeability. There's no doubt about it. They're a very presentable, amiable young pair, but that's surely a given. That's the lowest of all bars. All presenters should be amiable and appealing. Roz and Katie are amiable and appealing, but I tune in for your expertise and your passion as well as those things. I get those things that she described as my friends from my friends. To be relatable is a given. That should be just the beginning brick, and then you build those bricks with something. I just don't. Why should I listen to Jamie Lang being excited that he's learning to drive the deck for the first time? I want to be in the hands. That's where my licence fee is going. I want to be in the hands of somebody who knows more than me about these things. As well as entertaining, I do want to be educated and informed.
Sarah Carson, I guess it's a broader question, which is, will it work? Does it make sense for Radio 1 to do this, and is it going to pay off? That is another matter, because I personally don't. I think it's a good punt, but I think if they weren't great charismatic personalities, then listeners will see through it. People might have all the followers in the world, but if they're not good in a particular medium, people are going to switch off and they're not going to hang around. Especially now when the competition for attention is harder than ever, and a lot of people really don't listen to radio for the music. They can choose the music that they want to hear elsewhere. They can stream perfectly curated playlists that appeal to their exact taste. What they're listening for is to be distracted, to have some company, and I think that word relatability is hugely overused. But I think they have nailed it. They're willing to be really, really open about their marriage, about their relationship, about things that annoy themselves
annoy each other, which, you know, you can argue that is dumbing down radio, but it is working. And if they weren't both, you know, especially in the case of Sophie, having a really sharp wit, it would have really, people would have got bored of it by now. I don't think it will bring masses of followers over to the radio, though, who are not already listening. I think it might just keep people listening when they do switch over, because I think fighting for young people on radio is another battle.
Sarah, thank you very much. That's Sarah Carson. Thanks to Caroline Frost. I suspect we'll be talking about this issue again a couple of times on the media show in months to come.
Probably right.